since we had that important mascot done already. So this is just this is one that we've discussed a little bit in the past several times, at least me and Victor and Dan we've talked about it. So it's we have this set up in the curl source code, or actually this is the way we have curlx underscore functions in the libcurl code. And it's something as sort of semi-ugly as shared code that's not API compatible, but it's code that we share between the library and the command line tool and some tests, or the tests. It's kind of helpful because it avoids code deprecation when we want the same functionality in different places, but we don't want to export it in the API, because the API should be focus limited to transfer-oriented stuff, not other stuff, even though we've many times sort of realized that we've already implemented some fun helper functions in the library that would be useful in the tool as well. What do? In the beginning of times, I did the mistake of exporting them in the API, and now we have silly things in the API, but we quickly learned that that's not the right way to do it, so now we have those curlx functions instead, so we can build them specifically and use them in different places. So that we don't add stupid functions to the API, we don't have to support unrelated things in the API. I think actually this is one of the best lessons from over time in libcurl, that it's important to keep the API focused on just what we are here to do and not provide things that we are not here to do. I mean, leave other things for others, stay true to just do transfers. Other stuff is for other libraries, just so that we sort of narrow the scope, narrow the surface for problems and documentations and tests and blah, blah, blah. And we don't then have to have any API or ABI guarantees, because we can change the code in every place all the time. So we can just, if we realize that one of these curlx functions should actually have another argument, we can just fix that or fix the build, and whoops, it works. So it's very flexible and convenient. Just a little bit ugly, because we have different ways to do it in different places. There are some of them are functions called like that from the beginning. A whole bunch of them are provided as defining the symbols that are actually called something else in the code. And of course they're built multiple times, so they're built potentially 3 times, potentially many more times I think, in the libcurl lib tests and stuff. So some of them built many times to get used everywhere. And why, when we can actually make it into a curlx library that could have been just built once and then linked with all the others. We could have it like internal and static only, no external users, just do that as internal helper library and maybe clean things up, sort of fix the build situation, the user situation a little bit better, and it could be better. I think all of that, it makes perfect sense, but it's also, my biggest scare really is the temptation. So, wow, now you have a new library in there with some helper functions, and that would have been good to do. And then, we should also add blah, blah, blah in there. And all of a sudden, it's no longer that effectively the thing to just get code better in many places. Now it starts to become itself a feature and monster in itself. And I'm most scared of that. Whoa, wait a minute, now you have a library with fancy helper functions. That could be fun to use in my other project over there. And it's already here, you should just, and then no. Then suddenly all of those good things with this are not good anymore, because now suddenly you have ABI and blah, 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 and we need to document them, and then we have the test cases just for all these, and suddenly it'll just explode and everything with tears. And
how much source is it really?
I would say, I don't know, 5 source files, something, 7, it could be something like that. It's like maybe right now, 20 functions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
something in that ballpark.
Mm-hmm. So there's different build options for the library and
Yeah.
the command line tool, right? So is
Exactly.
it even possible to build it once
Of
and
course.
use it everywhere we need to? Tests, CLI, and the curl?
Non-trivial.
It's not really.
I think it can be.
It could be.
I think it's not right now, but I think it could be.
Yeah. It would actually nice to have this standardized and
so
cleaned up.
But if you link it statically, you link it to libcurl, you link it to curl, you link it to the test curl, which is also linking libcurl. Will you have many copies of the object code then?
I think ideally not.
You wouldn't.
Ideally it should just be one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Well,
just want.
if you're building a shared library, libcurl, then there's a copy in there. If you're building
There
the
shouldn't.
CLI, it will be in there
Yeah.
as well. So there'll be two copies. of
Correct.
the
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with the tests. There'll always be the copy in the .so and whatever
So
else.
it's basically the same as it is right now. Right?
Yeah.
Right, if you make it a static library, then it's the same as it is right now.
Yes.
You only have to
Just,
compile it a single time. That's the
Just
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
complex.
you
But-
just compile it once, yeah.
but if
But
it's
can you
many
do this?
functions, is it like worth it?
Can you do this?
I think if you build a shared library, you're well on the way to the future side of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Like,
A shared library, but that becomes visible to the outside then.
Yeah.
right, we can't have it. It can't be visible to the outside, right?
No.
Because the tool and the library still has to be
Yes.
exactly as.
But
Exactly.
is
So
the
you-
status quo causing any problems, actually?
Sometimes when we fiddle with it, sometimes because it's a little bit of a messy setup,
Yeah.
and we haven't had any clear rules on how to do this, so it has sort of grown into this organically. So basically, this could be one way to just clean up the situation and make it a little bit formalized, standardized, and maybe a little bit cleaner in the source code and more understandable for the newcomers. Because going into the code now and you see these curlx functions, I mean, you'll get crazy just by understanding. Well, wait a minute, one function is made like this, and another function is made completely different, and they're all using curlx. But when I find the function, it's not called curlx anymore, and so it's a little bit about it. Just maybe reduce the insanity a little bit.
Yeah. Really nice.
Even though there's not big.
How active are these sources regarding to changes in the last years?
Yeah, I think they move around a little bit. That's not a lot, I think. I mean, like for example, I can't recall right now. We've also sort of.
Is there some date parsing in there and stuff like that, or what?
There is some
Just
date
can't
stuff,
remember
yes.
what.
Yeah, there is.
There's the now function.
But the date parser has been really solid for a long time.
Well,
But for example, for a while I figured also originally, or at least like 20 years ago, I figured that would be also a way to transition away some of the functions that were added to the API. We could just remove them from the API, just keep them as curlx functions. That was sort of the idea, to then reduce some of the surface from the API. So we added a bunch of those API function calls also as curlx functions, because that would be the long-term way when we remove them from the API. Then over time we realized that no, we will never remove anything from the API. so then they existed as both in the API and curlx functions. For example, the printf functions, the way the ones we have, our own version of them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they have been updated multiple times recently too. But they don't need to be in the curlx section. I don't think they are now.
Okay.
Can they be replaced by some dependency?
Not easily.
Probably not.
And I think that's also, since now they're very, custom written for our purposes, so they're only that. I would be sort of scared. Finding a dependency that has that, it'll also have 32 other things, and it'll be sort of much bigger, messier, and more complicated to add to something. The beauty of this is these are things that we control, and we are sort of, when we want to fix them, we can fix them, and we're both producers and users of it, so it's all within our backyard. Anyway, I don't think we will sort of fix this. I just wanted to bounce it around.
Yeah, it's
another way.
I think it's a common problem in server projects to have this
Yes.
shared code which is not public and how to trick that. And I don't know, for example, how Rust would allow this. You would want to have a crate which is only used internally.
We even have stuff that are public but only for the crate, for inside the crate, and not like. I think you can make a module that's public but only inside the crate and export it publicly if you use the crate from outside.
Yeah, but you don't want to export this.
I guess you
that's
could just
great.
tell, we will break this, do not use this in your production.
Ah, okay.
I mean, one thing you could
I
do
have a
is,
lollipop for you.
because
People
it's a
will
manual-
use it.
Yeah,
I know, I have grades already, but
Sorry, Dudu.
Yeah, but it's,
because
I was
that's
just
why
thinking
make
because
sure
in the
name
Rust
is
has
different
events
for
as
every
well.
release and
I mean, you would be great for this kind
that
of
would
stuff,
make it
but you
much easier
didn't
for us.
want anyone else out except your
Using
modules
this
to
crate.
use this crate.
And I doubt that's possible to make an actual separate crate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if people want to use it or
social
copy the
construct.
files,
But yeah,
Yeah.
that is obviously not
Uh-huh.
very future proof.
Yeah.
They do that.
You're just thinking.
Yeah, we could do that as well. We could just put these functions in accessible to the outside from the curl and say like, don't use this, but
Yeah, underscore.
it doesn't work really, and
Curlx.
especially with shared library linking. It's also problematic.
Yeah, yeah.
Can people already use functions that aren't like in the core API? Like,
They can't
For
access
sure.
anything that we don't
Right.
export, right?
You
Because
restrict.
nothing is shown.
Yeah.
We only expose what we want to show. So
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
private ones are just.
Yeah.
they just don't exist.
They don't exist.
Yeah,
For
they're
example.
not available as.
I mean, in most there are architectures or systems when it's not true,
Yeah.
but in
There's
in
an
the modern
option.
world, that's how it works.
Right.
Hide them.
and also if you put them there, it also kind of means, I mean, right now you can run a curl binary with a newer libcurl.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily recommended, but you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you add those
Yeah,
symbols
exactly.
to the library, that breaks.
Yeah, but
And you
we-
get all sorts of
I mean that's
education.
totally out of the question. They would never be added to the so that would violate sort of every
Yeah.
sanity
So you
we
need to
would have.
duplicate object code. The question is, do you have duplicate source code or not? And if you have not duplicate source code, how often do you compile the source code?
Something like that.
Mm.
Possibly, as a sort of a more of a middle way, we should just start with making sure that we do them in the same way, just
Yeah.
sort of more consistent way,
Yeah.
as a sort of
I went
first
in
step.
there once and tried to add something, and I think something broke because it was not really obvious how to do it.
Exactly,
Yeah, that's-
and
yeah.
and that's sort of the downside.
Yeah.
It's messy.
It's a little bit quirky.
Very
So this proposal is more one way to clean it up.
Yeah.
There are other ways to clean it up. We can also just no, we don't do this. We decide on a consistent way to do it, sort of, and then we do that consistently through the code, and that would also be a one way to clean it up.
I'm not opposed to duplicating the source of this if it makes everything else simpler. I don't think it's such hotspots of change that we cannot do some stuff twice in the similar source files.
I think that gets very messy pretty fast because like when we worked on not resolver, that there is like a authoritative and a recursive DNS server. We had some an implementation of a tree, and those diverged very quickly.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's and then one needed something that was implemented in the other, but
Uh-huh.
it was not easy to like just transfer the changes
Bring that over.
back and forth because they just they just
Yeah.
diverge over time. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, we have
How
this
do
in
you
curl
build
with a
the
few
system
functions and it's
right
not
now?
good.
Does it copy them around? Does it just build them with its different target directory?
It builds them in different directories, so it's still the same source, but it'll build them with different flags.
Maybe a good first step could be to just put those files in their own directory, so
Yeah.
it's clear what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Right
one way
now
to
they're
do it. Right, just have a curlx directory within the libcurl
Yeah.
directory and just
And then
And that could also help.
Change them to a static library or not. It's
Yeah.
kind of a build system implementation
Yes.
detail, not really.
Yeah,
They could be. A
I mean,
static
separate
library
the
or
sources
system
into
of
their own.
Windows or-
Yeah, just
Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
get us.
Put the sources into their own directory is definitely a good step, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can immediately see these are things that.
Exactly, and these have these properties, so they need
And
to be
that
written.
also means that your build system itself gets cleaner. That to build the tests, you never compile a file for
Because it's also that these files, right, they need to be then be possible to actually use this way. So they cannot mix, they cannot have too much other library stuff in them. They need to be sort of
Yeah.
independently written so that they can be used in this way.
It also gets clear what you're doing. I mean, if you're compiling the tool, in an ideal world, you're not touching any C files from lib.
Right.
But
And
Yeah,
right now
and
you
that-
touch some.
that's
Yeah.
not, yeah, so that would be nice, but it's not like
It's
this.
less clear what's going on.
Yeah, but yeah, good ideas. I think we should start with that to just clean things up, move them out from or
I think
into
that
a
would actually
subdirectory.
solve most of the actual problems.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's a totally valid point. I think we should.
yeah.
I think that's
Sounds good.
the road forward. Thank you. And I think I'm done. What's my?
You're done and
Yeah.
over. Finally.
That was my 6th presentation.
There was a slide for that.
So Jim, do you want coffee first, or do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, what do we think? It's 2:30 now. Maybe we do a little coffee, a little break.